Thanks to Chairman Wayne Davis for inviting me to join you virtually today.
So I'm really excited to be part of the effort to look at the expansion of rail passenger service, giving us that cross-platform connection in Boston.
You are an organization that can every day see what you've accomplished when you see that silver train going from Brunswick through Portland to Boston.
I'm here to advocate for Train Riders Northeast proposal for a much simpler way to get from Brunswick to New York City.
It was certainly worth the trip down here, considering that we are planning a train from North Station to this hall, through Worcester, Springfield, Hartford, and New Haven to the Moynihan Train Hall. What a wonderful spot at the end of the trip.
Good afternoon. I'm Wayne Davis, Chairman of the Board of Train Riders Northeast, the rail advocacy group formed in 1989 to explore the possibility of having Amtrak extend their service to Portland, Maine. That was to be a first step to restoring rail service in northern New England. Our efforts were the driving force that made Amtrak's Downeaster service possible. In addition, our creation of the Northern New England Passenger Rail Authority to manage the proposed service at the suggestion of then Maine Governor Angus King was another of our important accomplishments. Due to the superb management of NEPRA's Executive Director, Patricia Quinn, and her management team, the Downeaster quickly picked up the subtitle, America's Favorite Train, and before the pandemic struck, our Downeaster was carrying 2,000 passengers a day. This webinar is unlike any other meeting the Train Riders has held during our 33 years existence. Many of you will remember us as an organization that has always held our meetings in Greater Portland's hotel ballrooms or classic conference facilities, such as the Harris Heacock Inn in Freeport or the University of New Hampshire's New England Conference Center, where we hosted anywhere from 125 to well over 350 members. During our 33 years, we were fortunate to have among our featured speakers 7 presidents of Amtrak, 2 chairmen of the Amtrak Board of Directors, 3 Maine governors, 8 U.S. senators, 1 U.S. Senate Majority Leader, 4 U.S. representatives from Maine, 5 commissioners of transportation, 2 directors of the Federal Railroad Administration, a director of the Federal Transit Administration, and several CEOs of Maine's largest businesses, including the president of Pan Am Railroad multiple times. We've also included a number of authors of interest, such as Jane Holtz-Kay, Tony Hiss, Joe Vranich, and Robert Willoughby Jones. But enough about us. I'm sure you're looking forward to today's program. So I'm going to turn the meeting over to Andy Highland, one of our charter members and a former vice chairman of Train Riders Northeast, who will be our master of ceremonies for this meeting and will introduce our featured speakers and guide us through this new Zoom venture. I hope you enjoy the program that Webmaster Bill Lord has put together for us, and I'll be back with you all later on. Andy?
Yes, thank you, Wayne, and welcome again, a warm virtual welcome to all of you attendees in the most unusual year. I think we've all spent a little too much time doing these Zoom meetings. As Bruce, I think Bruce chatted up there, most of your attendees, and while you can't be seen, or we're just seeing the panelists, we would encourage you to speak out in the meeting through the chat rooms, and Bruce will be kind of monitoring questions. So at any time, if there's a speaker, if you have a specific question for a speaker or any of us, feel free to just use the chat button and we'll try to get to your questions as we can. We're very excited about this meeting as we're introducing Train Riders Northeast newest proposal or newest project. This is our official launch. And it's an easier way to get from Maine to New York City, and also easier way if you're in New York City to get to Maine. So that'll be later in the program. But right now I'd like to introduce our panelists. I don't see Patricia on, but Patricia Quinn from the Northern New England Passenger Rail Authority. Gene Skaropowski, Ross Capon, and Bruce Leeper. So Wayne, did you ever think our 33rd meeting would look like this? I don't think so.
No, I don't think so. I had something much better in mind, and with some good food.
Yes,
We'll get through. This is an experience for all of us.
Yeah, maybe next year.
But it's an important time.
And also, Bill, I'm wondering if the volume, I think, might be an issue on that. We'll see.
Not sure if I have control over that.
Okay.
That may be your own speaker volume on your computer.
Okay. All right. So anyway, the one thing, throughout the years that I think's been important, Wayne, is our DC delegation. Over the years, we've been, I think, very fortunate as an organization to really have over bipartisan support. I think I don't remember anybody that was in our delegation that hadn't supported our cause. So we're very fortunate that way. I know you have a number of stories, probably a few throughout the years.
Well, when we started 33 years ago, we began at the top because at that point we were fortunate, and George Mitchell was the majority leader in the Senate. So we had our foot in the door at that point. But you're right, everything that we have to thank our delegation for. And it's important to point out that this train has never been a Republican train or a Democratic train. It is Maine's train. And everyone, whether they were a Democrat or Republican or an independent, that is the one thing that was always universal. Support it, support the effort. So we've been very fortunate. It's where the money has come from.
Yes, yeah.
I'm delighted to welcome you all to the 33rd annual meeting of Train Riders Northeast. My thanks to Chairman Wayne Davis for inviting me to join you virtually today. This 20th anniversary year of the Downeaster demonstrates your commitment and effectiveness. On December 14, 2001, I had the honor of boarding the ceremonial train for the Downeaster's inaugural trip. At every stop along the route, we were greeted by enthusiastic crowds. Since then, more than 7.5 million passengers have taken the train, and service has been expanded to Freeport and Brunswick. In the 2 years before the pandemic, the Downeaster set new records for both ridership and ticket revenue. It is an economic engine for Maine, providing good jobs and strengthening our tourism industry. With their dedication to customer service and community support, the Downeaster and Northern New England Passenger Rail are national models of success. As the leader of the Senate Transportation Appropriations Subcommittee, I worked to secure $1 billion for Amtrak to help offset the revenue losses due to the pandemic. This included a $175 million set aside for state-supported routes such as the Downeaster. These funds are critical to protect this vital transportation infrastructure during this very difficult time. The success of passenger rail in our region would not be possible without the dedicated advocacy of Train Riders Northeast, Wayne, Patricia Quinn, and other advocates. Thank you for all your hard work, and I hope you have a great annual meeting.
Happy 33rd to Train Riders Northeast, one of my favorite organizations. You are an organization that can every day see what you've accomplished when you see that silver train going from Brunswick through Portland to Boston and those places in New Hampshire, and but you know what I mean. Congratulations on a study of perseverance, creativity, the work you've done, And I have to mention Pat, and I have to mention, of course, Wayne Davis, the granddaddy of the Downeaster. Congratulations for the work you've done. Keep it up. There are lots of good projects in the wind, and let's continue to work together to bring train service, better train service, faster train service, more extensive train service to the state of Maine. You've done something good, and I'm proud to have been associated with you in that great project.
Hi, I'm Congresswoman Shelly Pingree. Thanks so much for inviting me to share a few words at Train Riders Northeast annual meeting. While I wish we could all be together in person, I'm glad to be able to chat with you about one of my favorite things in Maine, the Downeaster. I am a huge supporter of rail travel and have been for many years. Rail travel brings Maine incredible economic and environmental benefits. It connects us, reduces the harm of climate change, and encourages us to visit new places. This December marks 20 years of the Downeaster's operation. Thanks to the efforts of everyone on this call, the Downeaster has consistently set new ridership records every year prior to the pandemic. More than 57,000 people rode the train in 2019. People are clearly drawn to the convenience, connectivity, and reliability provided by the Downeaster, and that's to say nothing of the chowder. Congress is set to take up an infrastructure package this year. I'm looking forward to supporting the Downeaster and efforts to expand Amtrak's excellent services in that effort. Expansion of the Downeaster would greatly benefit our tourism industry, encouraging those from away to travel beyond Maine's beaten path. Please know that I am your partner in this effort. I believe we can get there together with your enthusiasm for Maine's rail system. Thank you to Train Riders Northeast for your 33 years of continued advocacy on behalf of the Downeaster. I know it hasn't been an easy year for rail advocates, nor for any public transit system in our country. But hope is on the horizon, and your passion is steadfast. You've always had the vision to get us to the next big thing. I, for one, can't wait to get back on the Downeaster. Thanks, and stay in touch.
So our first speaker is not on board yet, as far as I can see. Oh, yes, she is. Look at that. I told him you would get in just in the nick of time, that you're so good at this. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker. Patricia Quinn's the Executive Director of the Northern New England Passenger Rail Authority. And she's really the person responsible for the day-to-day operations of the Downeaster. We've worked closely with you, Patricia, I think over the years, trying to improve the service as best we can. Hang on, let me get my full screen off. We've brought in train hosts, service extensions, and we always consult with you on ideas about what you think would be the best. And she's really an amazing leader. I think we're so happy that she loves Maine so much. Otherwise, I would joke that we'd probably be introducing you as the president of Amtrak if you didn't like to stay in Maine so often. So I'd like everybody to give a warm virtual welcome to our partner and who presides over America's favorite train, Patricia Quinn. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Andy, and I apologize for the delay. I've actually been here. I just was on the wrong link, that's all. So I'm suffering from Zoom fatigue these days. I was mentioning yesterday, I think last week I had more than 30 hours of Zoom meetings. You'd think I'd get it right by now, but anyway, here I am. So I'm really happy to be here today and to be sharing this event with all of you. I assume you can see my presentation screen? Okay, great. So this year is obviously a little bit different, and I have to say it was one of the reasons for my little bit tardiness. It was hard to know what to say and how to say it this year, but I still am feeling optimistic, and being around all of you just really reinforces how important it is, the work that we do. So we're going to go through a little bit our 19th year into our 20th year, and just think a little bit about what our 21st year may be like. So I'm going to start by looking backwards a little bit, and just saying that in fiscal year 2020, which ended in July of, or in June of last year, the Downeaster transported 417,718 passengers, the equivalent of more than 33 million passenger miles, and we generated more than $8 million in revenue. This was coming after a year that we had had about 575,000 passengers the prior year, and it generated about $11 million in revenue. So it was a little bit of a downgrade for us, but obviously it was a year that was far from normal. Towards the end of our fiscal year, we ran into some real serious challenges. Had those challenges not happened, though, it's important to remember that the Downeaster was poised and positioned to have its very best year ever. Had that pandemic not hit, we'd have transported 600,000 people by the end of the year and would have generated more than $12 million in passenger revenue. So we were really on a good trajectory, and I know we're going to get back there again. What did happen, though, is the pandemic hit, and we had actually 63 days in that year where there was no train service at all, and we just had lonely train tracks. But during that time, we tried to make use of the time that we had and did a lot of projects, replaced 15,000 ties in partnership with our host railroad, Pan Am Railways, and did some bridge panel replacement, bridge timber replacement on the Four River Bridge. So took advantage of the time that we could not operate service, and got some good work done to bring us back reliably. And then in July, we came back with 8 round trips a day, which looked a little bit different than it did before, but really appreciate the support of our operating partners, Amtrak, Nextine, for really kind of rising to the occasion and modifying the way we did business on a regular basis to make it relevant to the times that we're in. Plexiglass was restored in the cafe. Here's our friend Ralph in the cafe. Changing the way we did things, even introducing at-seat service for cafe during this time, which we hope to continue into the future. So if we look at where we are moving into, so we ended fiscal year 20 in June, began fiscal year 21 in July. And since the 1st of July, the Downeasters transported 51,892 passengers, and that's from July 1st through February 28th. You know, that represents only 13% of the people that we transported in 2019 pre-pandemic levels. And this graph here kind of shows the ups and downs of the year from when we restored service in June with 1 round trip, went to 8 round trips in July. You can see in September, there was a little bit of a peak as things started to settle off a little bit and travel restrictions were eased, but those travel restrictions came back in the end of October, November, and December. We really kind of had a time where we only had about 10% of the ridership. But the good news is that we're definitely on a rebound, and you can see that graph going up, and it's going to continue to go up and up into the future. As we look at how fiscal year 21 through June, how we're going to carry through that, we're going to anticipate that in this fiscal year, we'll have generated about $827,000 in revenue, which is only 15% of what it was in 2019 levels. But again, there's really good news, there's good news because in March alone, to date, in March, as of yesterday, we transported 6,400 passengers. Now, this represents 19% of 2019 levels, which means there's a steady trajectory of things that are moving ahead. And in fact, that 6,400 passengers through the 24th of March is more passengers than we transported the entire month of February, the entire month of January, or December, or November. So the key is that the tide is starting to turn. We're seeing the trend, and as travel restrictions are being relieved, we're seeing our ridership go up. That means people have missed us, and we're here. We think that by the end of the fiscal year, we'll transport about 84,000 passengers. We'll generate about $1.1 million in revenue, with an expenses about $16 million. That's going to leave us with a gap of about $15 million. But thanks in part to the wonderful people who introduced this program, our congressional delegation, who've provided relief to Amtrak, its state partners, and transit agencies, we're going to have the resources to get through this and come out on the other side of this pandemic, and we're going to come out stronger than ever. We're going to be starting a new marketing or refreshed marketing campaign. It's been a little challenging to tell people that we're here without encouraging people to travel with all those restrictions. But as things are relieved, you're going to start seeing the work of our marketing director, Natalie Bogart, really start to get out there. And the Downeaster, making it very clear that the Downeaster is here to connect you to the people and places that you've missed. And you're going to see that theme throughout the course of the next couple of months. I'm also happy to say that our board of directors met earlier this week and voted to restore all 5 round trips. So there'll be 10 trains a day that'll be operating between Brunswick and Boston beginning in May of this year. We don't have a date yet, but we're coming back with all 5 round trips, which is really good news. And a little bit of a modified and a better schedule that we've tweaked a little bit to meet the needs of today's traveling public, because we know that it's not going to be a switch. People aren't going to come back and travel the same way that they did before. You know, we had a lot of capacity, peak hour out of Boston at night, a 5 p.m. train and a 6 p.m. train. We're going to kind of spread it out a little bit, and we're going to have a 3 o'clock train that leaves Boston. So you'll have a 12, a 3, and a 5 o'clock option. Again, to be able to try to accommodate the needs of people who don't work like they used to, don't travel like they used to, but to be there when they need us to be there. The good news is that as we move into the spring, Fenway Park is opened up with only capacity of 4,500, and TD Garden is open with capacity of 4,200. But you know what? Those numbers are at the low end of the scale too, and those are going to grow. And again, the Downeaster is going to be here with the flexibility to add that late night schedule to be able to accommodate people that are going to the Garden or to Fenway for sporting events or concerts. So we're excited to be able to provide that for folks as well. Also, Amtrak, beginning the end of May, is going to lift the constraint that they have on capacity of the trains. So we'll be able to sell more seats to people. Again, we're going to monitor that and just make sure that we again, are making every decision that we make with keeping the health and safety of our passengers and crews in mind. But again, as things move forward and things change, we're going to be back to a new normal before we know it. Getting into fiscal year 22, we have to set our expectations reasonably. And looking at what travel trends may be in the future, at this point in time, we're hoping that we might, and this is going to be modified many times as we go through the year, but at the next year, we're hoping to be at about 55% of the levels that we were in 2019. We're hopeful we'll be able to change that number from 87,000 passengers to 313, which will be good growth. We're looking forward to generating about $6.3 million in revenue. And that's still going to leave us with a big operating gap. But again, thanks to the support of our congressional delegation, and I just can't tell you how important their support for the Downeaster, for passenger rail and Amtrak has been. Take every opportunity to thank those folks, because it's really going to make the difference. It has made a difference, and it will continue to make a difference to keeping us here doing what we're doing. Good things are on the horizon. We haven't been sitting around. We're in the final phases of finishing the grant, the final paperwork to receive the grant that we were awarded last year, that Chrissy grant that's going to extend double track in Wells and is going to add a second passenger platform. We're going to, by the end of the summer, you'll see work starting there. There's going to be earthwork that's going to be starting. They'll be putting things out to bid. And we're looking forward to a couple years from now being able to operate not just 4 round trips, 5 round trips, but 6 round trips, giving that extra trip from Southern Maine into Portland to be able to provide a commuting service for people that are traveling within the state of Maine. So that's very exciting. You'll see that project coming. We're also quite excited that the Maine Department of Transportation has finished an analysis and kind of given us the reins to be able to actively pursue a mainline station location in Portland, critically important to our recovery. That mainline station is going to eliminate 150 minutes a day that trains spend backing up going into the existing stations. 150 scheduled minutes every day. So being able to make that trip and take 15 minutes off the trip between Brunswick and Boston is going to be a game changer, and we're really looking forward to that and looking forward to an exciting new venture there. We've also resumed our discussions with the folks in Falmouth to explore a new Downeaster station in West Falmouth, right off of exit 53, being able to provide more convenient access for people coming from the north and west of Portland, to avoid people having to drive into Portland to catch a train. So we think that'll be great for us as well. And of course, some of us had a presentation the other day, but it's unbelievable what's happened in Boston. And, 20 years ago when we started, the one thing that the one word I would use to describe North Station was pigeons, because it was an empty place filled with pigeons. Now it's a vibrant, thriving, brand new, modern complex. It's a wonderful place for the Downeaster to land. And as Train Riders pursues their initiatives to provide better connectivity from this wonderful, wonderful hub to the rest of New England, it's really a wonderful, it's a wonderful place, and it's really made that transition from the Downeaster service to the rest of Amtrak much better, and really supports those efforts that you have to make that connectivity even more streamlined. So, we started off slow in the beginning 20 years ago. We grew to tremendous success. This last year has been as challenging for us as it has been for everybody. We so much appreciate the support of all of our operating partners, particularly Amtrak. Amtrak has done wonderful things throughout the course of this pandemic, continue to help us make improvements, do things to improve our service. We've expanded bike service. Amtrak's added new technology that allows people, when they go online, to see what the capacity is on the trains. There's a new bid up program that allows people to bid on business class seats. We've all tried to continue to keep the ball moving. And, while this has been a setback and it's going to take us a little bit to get out of it and take some hard work, I'm really very, very confident that the best is yet to come for the Downeaster and for all of us. So as always, I thank you all at Train Riders Northeast for your ongoing support, your energy, your enthusiasm. And like I said, the best is yet to come. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Patricia. I think actually that's remarkable. Good news, and how well you guys have fared through, I guess, what's just a totally unprecedented year, for all of us. And it's also nice to really have some great news. I'm loving here in the Falmouth, my town, stop, and and all of the great things to come. And we hope that our project will really start to feed and help to feed all sorts of new passengers, into the Downeaster, and bring more people to Maine by the train. As I said, for participants, if you did chat in to Bruce, if you had questions for Patricia, that would Bruce can pick them up and bring them to us, or forward those to us. And Wayne, I don't know if you had any words for Patricia.
Well, other than saying, watching the slide presentation, we forget the crew members. I was just thinking here, sitting watching how important they are, and they go about their work quietly every morning. Occasionally I drive over to the Brunswick station and watch departures and sometimes arrivals in the evening, but they are key, and they have just been wonderful. Amtrak has provided probably their finest conductors and engineers, and the Downeaster seems to have gotten the A-team from the very beginning. And even the cafe car, the catering company, what a job, now that they can't prepare their own foods and they're using prepackaged, but it's still rather luxurious to be able to sit on the train and have something to eat. So all your efforts, they just pay off. It's the A-team, both at NEPRA and Amtrak.
Exactly. I think a lot of ingenuity and a lot of being nimble on your feet, it sounds like. Bruce, did we have, is there anything you wanted to forward on?
Yes, we've got a couple of questions here that Patricia's probably in the best position to answer. The first is, anything happening on going from Brunswick to Rockland, particularly any future testing?
There really is nothing on that right at this minute. The pandemic has kind of directed everybody's attention, so we haven't pursued that or moved that forward. The Maine Department of Transportation, I think, was doing an evaluation of the bridges on that line, and we're coming back with an assessment and to see really what the long-term infrastructure. But it continues to be, kind of an inspiration of mine to be able to see at least a seasonal part-time extension up there. The Rockland branch is really an incredible asset to the state of Maine. And, once we kind of get back on top of things again, we're going to continue to at least explore that option and keep that vision alive as well.
Well, another big question is, can you share any thoughts on how the sale of Pan Am might impact the Downeaster either positively or negatively?
What I can say is that, change is always challenging. There are always challenges associated with it. But we've had a wonderful working relationship with Pan Am. We continue to have that. And we're working on establishing a working relationship with CSX. And so, they've been very open to hearing our needs, our priorities. And we, are really working hard to establish a relationship and kind of move that pattern forward so that we can enjoy, good service, even better service. I think this has the potential to have some really positive impacts on the service and on the state of Maine. And that's how we're approaching it. And I'm optimistic that this is going to be a good thing for all of us.
Okay. Just a couple of more questions here. One person's asking, is anyone ever thinking about installing a bench in the Portland Station passenger platform, allowing disabled passengers a rest area between trips?
It is now.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I asked the question.
Good answer.
Well, that's very good to get that out. Okay. And then will the Wells Passenger Bridge be equipped with either elevators or ramps to accommodate motion challenged customers?
Yes, it's actually going to be equipped with elevators. So it definitely will be ADA compliant and will be fully accessible to everyone.
Okay.
Awesome. Good.
And I think that's where we are right now for questions.
Great.
Mostly for Patricia.
Thank you, Patricia. We so appreciate everything you do. We really do. It's very heartfelt from our organization. And I'm looking forward to really an excellent year. I get my second shot tomorrow. So I do think, that gives you that feeling of like the end is in sight, when more people are getting vaccinated. So I'm really, I'm planning all sorts of my wife and I trips now. So I think there's a pent up demand for travel right now. And I think you're going to hopefully beat all your expectations this coming year. So
thanks. And I think it will too. And I just want to take one more opportunity just to thank the team. Everybody has really stuck with it and worked so hard through this. It's been hard on all of us, and everybody's been doing double duty with their families, but everybody's given it 100, continues to give it 100% every day. So Brian, Natalie, Jim, Will, Leslie, and Steve, really, we have the A team and of course the team at Amtrak. So this is something that definitely takes a village. So I appreciate being here today, but there's just a whole team of people who work hard every day to bring you the product that you see. So thank you.
So true.
Before you go, Patricia, we do have one other question that's come in. Is NEPRA going to support the legislation in LD 227 for the feasibility study of extension of passenger service from Brunswick through Augusta, Waterville to Bangor? Do you guys take a position on things like that at this point?
At this point in time, we are not taking a position on it.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thanks again, Patricia. We'll see you soon. We'll be on the train. Our next speaker I'd like to introduce is, I think, probably one of the most knowledgeable people in the country about passenger rail service. He's also been a great resource for us over the years. He was originally a New Englander, and then he became a Californian to go out there to run the Capital Corridor service. And then he decided to be a Floridian and he was instrumental in the creation of the Brightline in Florida. And I'm not sure where you are now, Gene, but we welcome you, our longtime friend of Train Riders, Mr. Gene Skorpowski. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much. I am still in Florida, and I expect that at least for the foreseeable future, that's where I shall be. We're going to shift a little bit from Maine to points further south and give you an update on what has been going on both in Florida as well as the Brightline's planned expansion across the country. So, first slide. In the case of transportation, the view that Brightline has been taking is that yesterday's trains are not tomorrow's trains. And what is happening with the introduction of the types of trains that are operating in Florida now and will be on the West Coast really is transformative, both in terms of amenities as well as safety, security, and I'll call it personal environment regarding safety for the pandemic type of stuff. Next one. The Brightline, as you know, is the only privately held intercity passenger service. Florida and Orlando is the #1 domestic destination for tourism. And even during the pandemic, Walt Disney World, Universal Studios, SeaWorld, and others are still attracting people. The success in Florida has prompted Fortress Investment Group to look at Brightline West, a proposed service from Las Vegas to Los Angeles, utilizing true high-speed 200-mile-an-hour service. Next slide. In the reimagining of travel, the most important component that they've looked at is the connectivity element. This has always been a challenge for people when they arrive at a train station. What do I do now? How do I get to my final destination? And in some cases, how do I get to the station to begin with? In the case of Brightline, they partnered with Lyft, and Uber is involved as well with being available at the stations, so that when people make their train reservation, they can also make the connecting reservation to their final destination or be picked up to be brought to the station to connect to a particular train. This has obviously a significant application potential in Maine as well, where the stations are located remotely from some of the major destination points. Providing that connectivity service is a real opportunity. Next one. The lineal population in Florida has made it an ideal location for rail service. And frankly, it's not terribly different than the coastal lineal population in Maine, where you have that same opportunity of clustered population centers and destination points, Maine Medical Center, other locations that are both business as well as tourism destinations. And having that lineal service is ideal for a passenger rail operation. In the case of Florida, you know the service had been running between West Palm and Miami. The construction to Orlando is been going full steam during the entire pandemic season, and agreements reached with Disney for the extension of the service into Walt Disney World. So you will be able to have through service connections all the way from Miami as West Palm, Fort Lauderdale, and Orlando into Disney World. Next one. The West Coast, Brightline West, as they're calling it, will be operating between Las Vegas and Los Angeles and utilizing European-style 200-mile-an-hour electrically propelled trains. This will be a 180-minute train trip versus a 5-hour drive, and is expected to attract an enormous amount of ridership because of the remote location of Las Vegas in respect to where all the people live, which is farther much farther to the west. Next one. Now, in order to impress riders with a modern and unique train, they also need modern and unique stations. And the stations are the gateways to the communities, much like the way airports have been designed to be gateways to their communities. And this is somewhat of a going back in history, because originally the train stations, including Portland's Union Station, long now gone, was a gateway and was an activity center. In Florida now, you have Miami Central, which is an enormous station complex. I'll talk about that a little more in a minute. But you also have now a brand new station at Orlando Airport, in the airport, built by the airport, and direct connections to all of the passenger gates at the airport. There are additional stations now that are under construction. Aventura, which is at a major marketing and shopping area. Boca Raton, a major population center destination, as well as demand center for travel. So, and there's also a station being planned at the Port of Miami, which will provide direct train service to shipside for the cruise ship market, which is expected to recover sometime in the next 12 to 14 months. Next slide. Looking at Miami Central, and this is a picture of the real station. This is not a rendering. You see the trains coming in. They operate about 55 feet above street level. And this has taken a 10-block area, which was nothing more than a surface parking lot for 30 years, and transformed it into virtually a city within a city. And that is the terminal station. And you see some of the structures. There's a 20 and 30-story buildings built over the trackway, and between the street level and the station platform areas is an entire concourse of restaurants, shops, and stores, providing a level of activity within an enclosed environment, and direct connections with the Miami Metro system and the Miami Metro Mover, which is a automated distributor for downtown Miami. Next slide. When you take a look at Fort Lauderdale Station is the gateway to a very vibrant Riverwalk area. And this has been built so that it is adjacent to the downtown area with a quick connections for these services that will take you to the biking areas, the walking areas, and provides a focal point for the Fort Lauderdale service. Next station. Next slide. Next slide is West Palm Beach. Now, adjacent to West Palm Beach, which is 1 block from their major activity center called Rosemary Square, you'll see a large building to the left on the screen. It's a 27-story tower, which on the lower 11 floors is parking for the station and residents, and apartments and condos up above. And this has created a whole new marketplace in an area that was very marginal in terms of its development and social area, and really transformed this part of West Palm Beach into a very desirable location for residents as well as business activities. Next slide. 2 adjacent stations, new stations that are being built along the route. This one at Aventura has been prompted largely by the business community because of its activity. And in the case of Boca Raton, the city is actually building the station in order to have service that now passes through without stopping to make their own station stop. Next one. I've talked about Orlando Airport. This is probably one of the most impressive facilities that I have seen for rail stations. It is the first new train shed in 100 years. All of the tracks are under a full train shed, protected from weather, with escalators and elevators up to a concourse, and that concourse is fully integrated with the airport and new gates that are being built. You can't quite see it here, but to the right of that building is already constructed about 60 new airport gates where that pond is shown. So the airport, they've used the station as an anchor for their New South terminal. I mentioned Disney Springs. Disney Springs is now on board to bring this train service into Walt Disney World, and it will be the jumping off point from there over to Tampa. Next slide. When we talk about the stations, it's not just a station stop, but it's an anchor and it's a catalyst for development. And in fact, the Downeaster, and I believe Patricia's had this study done, has demonstrated there's been some $7 billion worth of private investment that has been stimulated by the creation of the train service within Maine. The idea that Maine is now connected to the financial and focal point hub of New England and Boston, and the medical centers that it brings, et cetera, has added value to the state of Maine. And I think the people in Maine have now recognized that and have really embraced the support of the Downeaster service and its expansion. Just the development in Brunswick itself, which has created a hub around the train station, is a good example by itself. Next slide. This is a slide that I love. This shows the fleet of the Brightline trains that are operating in Florida. And I have this vision, and I've shared this with Patricia in the past, that I can see Brunswick Station with a fleet of state of Maine owned trains operating to and from. And if there's ever going to be an opportunity to create that, I think with the new administration in Washington and their desire to really make investments in rail service, this is the time. So I won't say any more than that, but I do believe that the trains that you see here were uniquely designed with a whole new concept. They are Tier 4 compliant diesel locomotives for emissions. They are quiet, so much more quiet than anything that's running out there now. They're terribly fuel efficient, and the passenger coaches have been designed so that they are the only ADA compliant trains in the world. You can get on any door on the car and you can take a wheelchair down the aisle of the train. So you have full accessibility to all the components. Now, I should mention that these trains are 100% Buy America compliant. They're built by Siemens in their South Sacramento plant in California. Not only do they building the trains for the Brightline service, they're also building 32 complete train sets for Via Rail Canada, based on the same design that you see here. The 5-state procurement, which includes Washington State, California, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Missouri, are buying the same coaches for the 130 of these coaches for their service. So busy is the Siemens plant that they have just opened a second facility on a former Air Force base on the north side of Sacramento. So we have the ability to build these kinds of contemporary trains here in the United States. Next slide. Again, I talked about all American trains being built with green in mind. These trains are actually operating with biodiesel fuel as well. They are incredibly fuel efficient, much more so than anyone even expected when these trains were purchased. Next slide. The breakup of the trains that are operating at Brightline are there's 5 train sets. They have a select section and a smart section. Select would be business class in anyone else's parlance, and smart would be the coach class. And the seats are operated in the business class as 2 and 1 and 2 and 2. There is 39-inch seat pitch on the entire train, and it aligns with the window so that every seat has a beautiful window view. And that's been exceptionally important on the marketing side. These trains can operate up to 10 coach cars long, so you can size the train for your service. These happen to be the initial trains at 4 cars. The trains that are being built for the Orlando extension will have 5 cars, and all of the trains will have an additional car added, so there'll be all 5-car trains. But again, the ability to expand them to 7 cars, 8 cars, 9 cars, up to 10 cars. All the stations and platforms and facilities have been built for 10 cars. Next slide. Again, I talked about tomorrow's trains aren't yesterday's trains. If you take a look at the facilities that are inside, the ability to serve people at their seats, the restrooms are all basically touchless. You have complete luggage storage, bicycle storage, all of the things that would be attractive to people to want to ride the trains. Next slide. I talked about the 2 comfortable coach experiences, but the 39-inch seat pitch was exceptionally important, and the seats recline, but not in the traditional way by having the back of the seat go backwards into the face of the person behind them. They slide forward more in a European style, which gives the ability to have a drop-down tray at each seat that is the same dimension and distance, so that you don't have rattling trays that you have to pull up or pull out. They're all on a just simple hinge. And this took some effort to develop these seats. Next one. What we found in the Florida business is that the discretionary riders will pay for comfortable service. The market will respond to these superior features. The ability to make a reservation and that connecting end of line trip, the ability to have food service at your seat, the ability to know that when you get on the train, you're going to have a reliable service. These trains run with 2 locomotives, 1 at each end. While you technically don't need the 2 locomotives at all times, if you have any mechanical failure, the second locomotive is able to provide the continuing service, so you're not either delaying passengers and you're not blocking the railroad for other trains when you might have to find some way to tow the train out. Next slide. The ridership forecast, again, the first year in operation achieved over 1 million riders. Unfortunately, like on the Downeaster, the coronavirus has created a hiatus. They're planning to reinitiate the service on the lower end starting at the end of this year, and the service going into Orlando is projected to be operating in the end of 2022 or beginning of 2023. The West Coast service, because of the marketplace in the Los Angeles basin alone, which is some 12 million people, has a much higher level of expected ridership. And with the fast frequency of the service, it becomes more economical. The faster you can cycle a train, the fewer trains you actually need to carry that market. So that the faster the train can make a cycle, instead of a 3-hour round trip, you make it a 2-hour round trip. You can basically eliminate 1 train set from your fleet. Next slide. Florida is obviously the ideal state because of its lineal geography. But if you take a look at the traffic base, the Miami metro area is number 5 of worst in the country. Now, Boston's not too far behind, down at number 8, but this becomes an attractive component for something like the Down East service, so that people who are coming from Maine, you might be able to have a free-flowing road until you get somewhere close to the Massachusetts line, and after that, it's a crapshoot. So if you have a reliable service that the Downeaster provides, it's very attractive, and people are willing and able to pay for that service. Next slide. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. This goes through the investment grade. that occurs and the number of jobs it creates and the spinoff. You've already seen some of that happening within Maine. Next slide. Building a more prosperous community. The rail stations act as an anchor. They are the catalyst for land development around the station, which basically could not take place if it weren't for the transportation service that becomes its core. And this is not lost in Florida. It is not lost on the private sector like at Fortress. They recognize that the land development opportunities that exist are the big investments and would be most attractive to developers. But those resources and those benefits cannot occur without that reliable and frequent train service. Who's riding the trains? Next one. What we have found is that younger discretionary riders are the marketplace of the future. If you take a look at the level of income, you will see that the highest level of income on the Brightline side is $100,000 to $150,000 per year in terms of income. If you take a look at the age bracket where people would be riding, it's that 21 to 35 age bracket, which is the younger discretionary group who are not as married to their automobiles as past generations have been. Next slide. How do customers rate the Brightline service? Well, based on that first year's operation and the surveying of the riders, it scored a level of 75. Well, if you took at the other, look at the other industry leaders, Virgin America Airlines, 62, American Express, 55, Apple, 62, Ritz-Carlton was the only one above at 78 and only by a few percentage points, USAA 75, and Amazon down to 28. So that the public that uses this service actually values it and rates it very, very highly. And I think that what I see, of course, on the Downeaster service is very much the same. When you do your customer service, it is highly rated. Next slide. The future, again, lies in the mobility-friendly networks, the ability to connect to services to get from where you are to where you want to go, and you use the train as the major component of that trip. And this last, what they call the last mile challenge, has always been a challenge for rail services, but now with the ability of these services like Lyft and Uber to be able to actually schedule and have a vehicle waiting for an arriving customer to take them to their final destination. Our technology has that capability today, and it's very well utilized. Only a couple of more, and I'll finish up. Miami Central, next slide. This has become the catalyst. This is an aerial photograph of what has been built at the station. You'll see the overbuild towers. There are actually 2 more towers planned for the future, one of which will reach 97 stories tall and has received a federal aviation exemption in order for that to be built because it is in the glide path to Miami International Airport. And that would be the tallest building in the South. Next slide. Now, even after COVID, attention is going to be really need to be focused on clean and sanitary conditions. I don't think that the public today will go back to their level of tolerance that they had in the past for facilities that are not pristine and well-maintained and clean. Trains have a unique ability with their air filtration system to be able to provide an exchange on the trains at a much higher level than airplanes can. Airplanes have to use just filters within recirculated air, where on the trains they're able to bring in outside air on a regular basis, where full air exchange occurs in a number of minutes, not a number of hours on an air trip. Last slide. we're looking at the potential for overbuild on the existing intercity service. Plans are being made to operate a commuter service that would be a complement to the intercity service. And this would operate on the same tracks and perhaps at a higher level of frequency. But it's not unlike what Patricia had planned for the Wells to Portland service for the commutation market. It is a complement to the intercity service market and not a competitor for it. So there's still a lot going on, last slide, in Florida, and the West Coast is probably breaking ground sometime in the next few months. So Brightline, as a private entity, is being built across the country, West Coast and East Coast, and expanded. So a lot to be learned and a lot to share. So I will stop there and thank you much for the opportunity to update you on the Brightline.
Thank you, Gene. I gotta say, I've watched your Brightline progress from kind of an idea to a reality, and I've just always been amazed being an architect and just knowing how much regulatory, oversight there is, and just building a single building. To see what you guys have accomplished is just truly incredible. You find now that you've done what you guys have done, is it getting any easier, or is every mile still difficult?
Well, I've often said that getting permission to build something takes twice as long as it does to actually build anything. I am hopeful that some of the more onerous regulations that have been put into place can begin to be streamlined. Because if we want to build anything that can compare, and the president, I think it was Pete Buttigieg, said that we want to be the leader in high-speed rail, not China. Well, China has an incredibly streamlined approval process, more like a dictator. But even with our sensitivity to the environmental and regulatory issues, we still have the ability, the technology and the capability, and certainly the human resources to build these kinds of trains. I mean, I always love to say that, China built a train from Beijing to Shanghai, about 980 miles, and they make the trip in like 4 hours and 45 minutes. Well, that happens to be the exact same distance between New York and Chicago. The fastest train ever probably made the trip in 17 hours. You could make a trip from New York to Chicago on a nonstop high-speed line in about 4 hours and 40 minutes. Well, compare that to what it takes for your air travel with your time to arrive, your security, your check-in, et cetera. It's very competitive. So there's still obviously a market for the longest trips on air, but rail, even in that up to 1,000 mile distance, if it's fast enough, can be competitive.
That's great. Wayne, did you have any thoughts for Gene?
Well, it was a delight to see. I was blessed about 2 years ago, and Gene gave us a tour of the Lauderdale station. I find, Gene, it was a beautiful tour, and thank you very much. I think it's the ideas have been moved to other places. Wait till you see the interior of the Moynihan train hall in New York City. There are similarities. I think somebody took some ideas from your Florida service, but it's wonderful. Thank you for that presentation.
Awesome.
Well, copying is the highest form of flattery.
Right.
I've always said steal from the best.
So Bruce, I saw a flurry of questions come in.
Sure.
I might want to pick a couple of the good ones.
Sure. Before I do that, though, Gene, I haven't had a chance to ride on Brightline, but I was down there about 1.5 years ago in Fort Lauderdale, and I sure saw it, because you've got this rail line where you've got the more local trains coming by, and they come by halfway decently fast, and then all of a sudden there's this whoosh, and this yellow and whatever of the colors it is thing goes zooming by, and it's very, very impressive just watching it from the road. So congratulations on all you've helped to do on that. I had one question on my own as well as this, which is the model that Brightline has seems to be as much real estate usage as it is rail usage. I mean, it's developing the stations. Where does it get most of its money from? From the stations and from the real estate use, or from the fares that it gets on the Brightline itself?
Well, the financial plan is basically that the rail service would stand on its own from the revenues that it generates, both from passenger fares as well as advertising and other components that are involved in it. But clearly, the real estate value that is created around the stations is where the real money is. And this isn't any different than it was 150 years ago when railroads were building. They weren't building because they liked trains. They used the trains to make money. And that's the same incentive that the private sector has today. So again, I say that the value capture around the stations couldn't occur without the transportation service. And even where there are what I call them loss leaders, that service is what generates the value that is then taxed by the local communities and becomes revenue to the local communities, and provides that concentration of development that really maximizes the land use, if you will. So you're not doing more and more sprawl.
Okay. Well, some of the other questions we had here, and I know it's a little controversial more recently, but the first question we got was, is Virgin Train affiliated with Brightline?
No longer. There was and I'm not familiar with all of the details, but there was a financial arrangement to use the Virgin identification, and for whatever reasons, that relationship went south between Fortress and Virgin, and the effort that Fortress had put into establishing the Brightline identity and has been retained, and Virgin is no longer a part of the Brightline family.
Okay. Are any stations planned for the west coast of Florida?
Well, the goal is to get to Tampa, which is the hub of the west coast on Florida. Beyond that, I guess, would depend upon what the marketplace determines once they get to Tampa. I've always said when a rail service has a good, solid core service, the trunk of the tree, it's easy to add branches. But if you want to add a lot of branches before the trunk is solid, you're asking for trouble.
Somebody was saying that they think that the original Brightline plans projected other stations between West Palm and Orlando. What happened to those?
Those are still being evaluated. There's likely to be, I will guess, probably 2 additional stations, one in the Stewart area and probably one in the Cocoa area. That's, again, large marketplaces. The Cocoa would tap into the Daytona watershed, and the Stewart would tap into the Central Coast area in Florida.
Let me just see here. And somebody is curious why Brightline West is estimating travel time LA to Las Vegas of 3 hours for a route of approximately 270 miles, and thinks that shouldn't it be a higher? Isn't it a higher speed line, and shouldn't it be faster?
Yes, but it will, at least initially, will be connecting with existing routings into Los Angeles, because the high-speed connection has not yet been built. So that the travel time on the highest speed between Victorville and Las Vegas will only be about 1 hour and 10 minutes. And the extension into Los Angeles requires the trains to run at a slower speed, and I believe initially making a connection to an existing service that will take them into LA. So until the California high-speed rail service is actually completed between San Francisco and Los Angeles, it will be difficult for a high-speed service coming from Las Vegas to interconnect with those unless they go at slower speeds.
All right, and then I have one final general question for all of the panel members. Someone has asked, will your slides be available after this meeting? I have no
In my
idea.
case, Bill has them, and I will put it into the capable hands of Train Riders Northeast.
Patricia, I know you're muted right now. Okay, good. And I don't know what you have, Ross, but
Let's find out. Third speaker, and then we're going to have a short intermission, and then we're going to come back for a brief period to talk about Train Riders' latest while we're really doing the official launch of our latest project, which I think is very worth staying for. But as our third speaker, Ross Capon, who's been the president of the National Association of Railroad Passengers. Ross, I think you're currently the president emeritus of NARP, or I believe it's the Rail Passengers Association nowadays. Ross has been another longtime friend and longtime resource, just like Gene at Train Riders. And I like to say that he's a frequent vacationer in Maine, so we see him up here occasionally. So warm welcome, Mr. Ross Capon.
Thank you very much, Andy. So 33 years ago, 1988, is when Wayne Davis walked into my office at NARP and said he was going to bring passenger trains to Maine. And you could probably say that, as Patricia said, the Downeaster is a model for the nation in terms of passenger trains, but it's also Wayne's work and Train Riders Northeast is also a model for the nation of how democracy works and how you can actually get things done. Now, in stark contrast with what you've heard so far, I'm going to indulge in a few historical slides and then talk about politics. Where I fell in love with railroading, this is Riverside on the New York Central's Boston-Albany division, the west end of Newton, the west end of the platform stretching across the arched Charles River Bridge. The single stanchion semaphore at right is the Highland branch. Next, please. And here in 1958 comes the last train off the Highland branch. Next. And the sign they're holding says end of the line. The line was taken out of service for a year, transformed into what is now the MBTA's Riverside Green Line branch. And Trains Magazine wrote when that opened that this preserved the inherent advantage of steel wheel on steel rail. These trains, of course, came from Boston. Next slide. Oops, wrong Boston. That's the UK in 1960. Okay, next slide. Back in 1966, this was July 23rd, the Grand Trunk ran a Saturday-only seasonal train from Montreal to Portland. It brought Canadians to Portland, and they transferred to buses. Next slide. For the trip to, I believe, primarily Old Orchard Beach, there are probably some old timers on here that know more than that. And when there was a station, the official guide tells me it was 2.5 miles from Portland's Union Station, that is the Grand Trunk Station. Okay, now we'll look forward. Next slide. This is kindly provided to me by Amtrak, and it shows you the Gulf Coast, where the Surface Transportation Board is just been petitioned because CSX and Amtrak could not agree on the terms. And so how the Surface Transportation Board decides on the New Orleans Mobile service is going to be probably very significant in terms of opportunities to get other services started. Up in the Chicago area, the Chicago Rockford, it's my understanding, quite possibly will be operated by Metra as an extension of their service. I see that Rockland is on the map here, and I hope to live to see that. Next slide. One more time back. This is back in 2012 when the Maine Eastern, or was it Maine Coast, had a wonderful service, and they also took travel agents up up and down. That's Brunswick, of course. Next slide. Coming past the Wiscasset Yacht Club. I spent a good many summers in on Westport Island, which was once served by a boat that linked the Wiscasset train station with with Booth Bay Harbor, and stopped in the middle of the Sheepscot River, and rowboat came out and got the folks off the boat. So there's intermodal transportation. The last slide, the next slide, and here they are arriving in Rockland. Okay, now we go on to the future, and we talk a little, oh yes, well, this is talking politics too, because the reason we got these trains back was 100% due to the effort of a lot of the folks that are watching right now, a tremendous lobbying effort to get Amtrak both the money and the mandate from Congress that you put back the daily service. And there is the dates, and you can easily find that if you go to amtrak.com and search on their news releases, and they'll give you the same information that you've got here in a more professional way. Next. So there are two new key people. Somebody could mute, please. There are two excuse me. Gary Peters of Michigan is now the chairman of the Commerce Subcommittee that oversees Amtrak. We had thought it was going to be Tammy Duckworth because she was the ranking member on that subcommittee, but she is now chairing the Armed Services Airland Subcommittee. So she has something to say about the Army, about the Air Force and the Army budgets, which is not insignificant. But, and by the way, the Democrats renamed the committee. It was previously simply Subcommittee on Transportation and Safety. It's now Subcommittee on Surface Transportation, Maritime Freight and Ports. And that is actually, I guess, a bow to accuracy, because the highways, well, I don't know if it's accurate or not, because highways are under the jurisdiction of Environment and Public Works. Mass transit is under the jurisdiction of the Senate Banking Committee. Anyway, Gary Peters is a new name of importance in our efforts. And on the Appropriations Subcommittee, for years, we had Susan Collins as the chair of the subcommittee and Jack Reed as the ranking member. So there was a New England lock on appropriations. But now Brian Schatz of Hawaii is the chairman of the Appropriations Subcommittee that handles Amtrak. And Jack Reed has gone on to bigger things, chairing the full Armed Services Committee. I will say that in my visits to the Hill a couple of years ago, I met with a young woman who worked on the staff of Senator Schatz, and she knew more about the Northeast Corridor than just about anyone else I had met. So I would not sell Senator Schatz short just because he lives in another version of heaven. That was not the word I was thinking of. What is the Roman Catholic word for? Never mind. Go on. Also new, we have a new chairman in the House Subcommittee on Railroads, which is going to play a very important role in the big infrastructure bill that we expect. Donald Payne of New Jersey is now the chairman of that, succeeding Dan Lipinski, who lost his primary. And we have a new chairman for the full Appropriations Committee, which now moves back from New York into New England. Rosa DeLauro from New Haven is the chairman of the full Appropriations Committee. In terms of New Englanders that are newly assigned to committees of interest to us, they are both from Massachusetts, Seth Moulton, of fame for his high-speed rail bill, and Jake Auchincloss, who is a freshman, who represents the district that I grew up in. Next. And you were constantly hearing about how Republicans are useless when it comes to transportation, except for Susan Collins, but it's not that simple. Even in the House, we had 8 Republicans on the T&I committee voting against a terrible amendment that would have eliminated all Amtrak funding. This was a February 10th amendment against Scott Perry's amendment. The amendment lost 23 to 43, and 8 of those 43 votes for trains came from House Republicans. And they're listed there, Florida, Illinois, New Jersey. And that's not just long distance. I think the Illinois reflects the importance of universities to the state-supported trains. Champaign, University of Illinois, my alma mater, and Southern Illinois University in Carbondale. And I believe Patricia once told us that the #1 reason for taking the Downeaster from Durham to Boston had to do with the university. Next slide is the other 4 T&I committee Republicans who voted in favor of Amtrak. And the other thing to say about Republicans, and of course you will hear many times that all the Republicans voted in both the House and the Senate, voted against the big COVID relief bill, the same bill that saved Amtrak. But make no doubt about it, there are some key Senate Republicans and probably a few House Republicans, as you just saw, that played a role in making sure that Amtrak was taken care of in those big bills, even if as a matter of party line procedure, they voted against the full bill. But Senator Moran of Kansas, Senator Wicker, the ranking member of the Commerce Committee, and Senator Daines of Montana are strong Republican supporters of Amtrak. So it's not as simple as you might conclude when someone tells you all Republicans voted against that bill. Next slide. And so here is the message. And you know, with 50 Republicans in the Senate and many of them not fans of Amtrak, it's going to take a lot of effort, again, to get anything like we would want to see in the form of an infrastructure bill. And the 2 best ways to do it, unless you already have an established relationship with your congressman or his or her staff, is to leave a message and leave a substantive message, and don't be offended if they don't call you back, because they're incredibly busy. Most of those staffers are juggling many issues, not just rail and not even just transportation. So if you can leave a simple, short message that has an ask, if there's a bill up, please vote for it, please vote against, or whatever. But it's really important. And like I say, do not be offended if you don't get a call back, but your message will be listened to. And if it was intelligible, it will even be paid attention to. You can also send an email. Usually the best way to do it, again, if you don't already have an established relationship, is to use the congressman or the senator's website. They usually have a web form where you can put in a message, and you can find all of those via congress.gov. And if you have any questions about all this stuff, you can ask me afterwards. My email address will be up at the end. Okay, moving on. Next slide. So we have the Amtrak Board of Directors, which I think and hope is in for a big change. The 5-year terms of all 6 sitting Amtrak board members expired starting in 2015 and ending in December. The board members under current law can serve until their successors are confirmed. To some of those board members, that must seem like forever. There are 2 vacancies also. The last time the Senate confirmed an Amtrak board member was December 15th, 2015. So that's almost 5.5 years ago. Was President Trump the first Amtrak era president to not get an Amtrak board nominee confirmed? Well, if that's so, it's because the White House Office of Personnel Management or the White House never figured out that Senate commerce always works bipartisanly. And so they kept queuing up Republican nominees to the board, but only in the last few months of the administration did they queue up any Democrats. And then that got screwed up because Sarah Feinberg, one of the Democratic nominees, did not satisfy Senator Moran when he asked her about her commitment to the long distance train. So Senator Moran had a hold on some of the Republican nominees and Sarah Feinberg. So it was frozen. And so President Biden, if he chooses to take it, has a chance to nominate the entire Amtrak board next. And so there are ideas on Capitol Hill about how to improve the Amtrak board. And HR 2, which was the big Invest in America Act led by Chairman Peter DeFazio of Oregon last year, is probably going to come back with the rail sections pretty much unchanged. There was a few very good, positive Republican fingerprints on the rail section. I'm thinking especially of John Robert Smith, the head of Transportation for America, and the one-time Republican mayor of Meridian, Mississippi, who put the concept of an intermodal station that could make a difference even if you only had one train a day on the map. So the new law will require the mayor or governor of a Northeast Corridor location with regularly scheduled service, the mayor or governor of a non-Northeast Corridor location with a regularly scheduled service, a labor rep next, and to individuals with a history of regular Amtrak ridership and an understanding of the concerns of passengers. Now, it has been said by people more knowledgeable than I that most of the Amtrak board members haven't been on a long distance train at all to speak of, notwithstanding their long service on the board. The Senate bill is probably going to strengthen the national network requirement because they're going to specify that both state-supported and long-distance routes get represented. In other words, they're replacing the House's lumping together non-NEC with state-supported and long distance. And there will be a representative of disability and the freight railroad industry. In case you were wondering, the freight railroad industry representation is vital if you expect to get anything through the Senate. Next. The one change that we expect in the new, in this year's version of the big infrastructure bill, the House bill, and probably the Senate bill as well, is language that will create rail commissions that actually can get things done, like the Southern Rail Commission. If we get a New Orleans Mobile train, it will be because of the Southern Rail Commission and because of its power. It has the ability to apply directly for federal funds. They can support services within a state or a multi-state services. They don't need the approval of their governor. Now, that doesn't mean that they're operating in a vacuum. Most of the Southern Rail Commission members stay in very close touch with both the city and state officials from their states, and they have continuity. They have many times been renewed, so they serve many terms. They don't need to seek the governor's approval. The governors make the appointments, but the commissioners serve fixed terms that don't coincide with the terms of elected officials. As drafted, the bill would, the commissions would get preference when applying for federal grants and would receive federal matching funds, matching state funds dollar for dollar for operation of the commission. So this is a hopeful sign in terms of actually getting more multi-state routes added. Next, please. So since I am the Washington representative of the American Association of Private Railroad Car Owners, I just wanted to throw in a few slides about the trials and tribulations of private car owners under Amtrak. I can say that if you're charging fully allocated costs when you're hauling a car on a train that's going to run anyway, to me, that says either not a lot of knowledge about how to run a business or a desire to minimize the business. And I suspect that the package express business was being charged that way. And I don't know whether that's going to be brought back. As you may know, it was terminated last September, just before the initiation of tri-weekly service. Next slide. So we got a provision into the big DeFazio bill last year which has a sense of Congress about the importance of private cars. And I won't read it. And next slide. And encouragement to Amtrak to basically adopt a more positive attitude towards private cars and charter trains. One of the difficult challenges with charter trains is that they must be run repetitively. You have to run 3 identical trips in a row, which is kind of limiting for the market. And also they have to be on Amtrak, regular Amtrak routes, even though one of the most desirable destinations is only about 9 miles off the existing route in Pinehurst, North Carolina, off the Silver Star route. Okay, next. And we also have had appropriations report language accompanying the fiscal 19, 20, and 21 bills, and hopefully we'll have it also in 22. So hopefully the new Amtrak board, if we live to see it, will also pay attention. Next slide, please. One of the interesting possibilities is called RailNet, and it is a legislative proposal that would separate Amtrak as an operating company from the infrastructure corporation. And it would empower the Surface Transportation Board to pick an infrastructure management organization which would maintain, improve, and operate Amtrak-owned infrastructure under a revocable 50-year lease. It would bring private money into the game in a serious way. It also would require a special purpose federal loan that would be guaranteed by a third party. And it would guarantee accomplishment of a number of projects, including Gateway, Susquehanna River, B&P tunnels, the Long Bridge over Potomac River. Go on to the next slide. And it has a goal basically of increasing, intensifying the use of the Northeast Corridor, but also of once and for all ending the debate about the cost of the long distance trains and whether the long distance trains are carrying Northeast Corridor costs or what exactly those fixed costs are. Their website is airnet, airnet-21.com, airnet-21.com. And here is my contact information. And thank you very much for your attention. Happy to ask any questions if anyone's still awake.
Absolutely, Ross. That's actually, I think, kind of a fascinating world that you are in the DC delegation. But that's where throughout, that's where all the money comes from and originates. It sounds like, so in general, things can we be hopeful on the federal level for passenger rail?
I'm hopeful. I'm always hopeful. I think that I don't think the full extent of Congressman Moulton's bill is going to get enacted, but if some, there are debates about whether we have the engineering talent to actually spend that much money in 5 years. But I think it's reasonable to be hopeful for something that is bigger than anything any of us remember.
It's called Patricia. I'm sure she could spend any amount of money that you would give her wisely, to say the least, as well, and use those dollars wisely. Wayne, any comments that you have for Ross?
Well, Ross's view of Capitol Hill for all the years I've known him is there isn't anyone on the planet who knows more about the inner workings of Capitol Hill when it applies to rail. No, that was so much up to date. You answered a lot of questions that I was going to ask, but you've already answered them. But thank you again, Ross. Your view is very valuable. I just can't get over it. I think the job you've done keeping people like us in touch with what's going on under the dome is just wonderful. Thank you for joining and sharing that with us today.
Thank you for all you've done, Wayne.
So I know, Ross, too, that, and I mean, I know that we keep our membership informed if there's an important bill on our Train Riders website. Is there another website, or are you just going to have them call you on your cell phone for if important legislation comes up? Where can our attendees go to kind of keep track of bills that are specifically have an importance to passenger rail in the country?
Well, of course, I'm only emeritus, and I would say the Rail Passengers Association is doing a great job of following everything. And I think they have a webinar next week with Moulton. I'm not sure about that. But so I would say, I would also say I write a column twice a month that's in the newsletter of the APRCO, the private railroad car owners. And so people can join as associate members for a mere $90 a year and get my take on stuff. And again, you can email me at rcapon3@gmail.com for that information, or just go to aprco.com, I believe it is AAPRCO.com.
Yep, we've got a couple of questions here. On the project you were talking about which proposes the separation of operations from infrastructure at Amtrak, there's a question. In the UK, separation of infrastructure maintenance from operational management was initially rocky. Any concerns about that from your point of view, Ross?
Well, I think the UK, everybody learned a lot from the UK experience, including the Rescos, the rolling stock companies, and a lot of people, some of the wrong people got rich. I
didn't, so I agree with that.
I do not have that concern, because I think that the folks that are behind RailNet are fully aware both of the British experience, the political realities that they have to deal with, both in terms of getting something passed and in terms of actually implementing their commitments.
Okay. Second question, is Amtrak still out of the charter train business?
Amtrak is, well, first of all, let me be clear. As Stephen Gardner was quick to say, they never got out of it, but most of the trains they were running since the beginning of 2018 were sports specials, sport team specials, I believe primarily in the Northeast Corridor, using Amtrak's own equipment. So in terms of charter trains using private cars, they basically, they pretty much exited the business at the end of 2017, but we're getting back in gingerly. There was a highly successful private car train in September that went from Albany to Rutland as an Amtrak train and then up to Burlington on Vermont Rail. Vermont Rail is a great host, and they plan to do a similar thing with a few tweaks this coming September. And there are usually opportunities for people to come on as paying passengers, because some of the private car owners sell space on their cars. So there is this requirement which we're trying to study. There's actually a plan that's probably still under the wraps that involves South Florida later this year, but that remains to be seen. If that would be a one-off, and we'll see whether Amtrak will go for it. But so there definitely still are charter trains, and we think there will be a Rutland, there will be a Burlington train this fall and the following year.
Okay, there are a couple of small things and then one big question. First of all, Rail Passengers Association does have a seminar coming up next week. I believe it's on the 30th, I think. Just go to www.railpassengers.org and you can get all the information you need about that. Secondly, we have a question. The spelling of the website you mentioned, APRCO?
Yeah, it's AAP as in Paul, RC as in Charlie, O.com. So it's just the acronym American Association of Private Railroad Car Owners, but only one R, AAPRCO.com.
Okay. And then the big question, and this is probably for all the panelists, which is that have you seen any changing attitudes at Amtrak with the change in management that's occurred over the last year? And if so, can you talk about anything positive, negative about that?
Well, I mean, they take direction from Congress. I will say in their favor that they put the daily trains back into sales inventory, I think the same day that the House voted and 2 days before the president signed that bill into law. So I will give them high marks for that. But if you read between the lines of my earlier comments, I did say that the restoration of that service is 100% the result of the lobbying efforts of RPA and a lot of the people on this call. So you can, maybe I will just stop talking there.
Gene or Patricia, you have any comments on that?
I guess I can, I'm hopeful that Amtrak will begin to take a look at non-traditional arrangements for either existing services, expanded services, or new services. Actually, Patricia kind of broke ground with Amtrak where she indicated that the Downeaster would have its own catering on board, not done by Amtrak. I think there are opportunities for Amtrak to sell its expertise in certain areas where it's not a quote Amtrak only service. I'm hopeful that they take a broader look at the things that they could do, even if it is not an official quote Amtrak service mandated or contracted. With the really focusing on private sector, private operations, let's say Amtrak operations of a privately built and operated service.
Patricia, you have any comment on any relationship or changes with Amtrak that you've seen over the last year or so? You're muted.
Yeah, I guess the one thing I'll say is I've long said that Amtrak performs best in a crisis. And this is the one. And I think there's a lot of optimism with the new administration and the White House. But all along, I have to say that it is a pretty business-focused group. And I think that they've done really well through this pandemic, as I mentioned earlier, kind of, continuing to find new technologies. I think they're forward-looking and trying to reimagine what ridership is going to be like and who their customer base is going to be like going forward. So, given the circumstances, I think they've done well. And I do think there is a lot of optimism. I think there's a strong interest in growing the network. And so that's a positive.
Okay. And then one final question, which is, can anyone talk about any thoughts on it or what may be happening on improvement of food service in Amtrak?
I'll just say that I have kind of not commented on food service during the pandemic because I know a lot of the changes that Amtrak made took into account the health of both their own employees and the passengers. And I also think the other thing that Amtrak specifically deserves high marks for is the health, their approach to public health during the pandemic. But I'll let others comment about anything else about food service.
Okay. Anything else?
All set, Bruce?
I'm all set.
Okay, well, that brings us, we're going to have a short, it's 3-minute intermission. So just for allow people to get up, maybe stretch your legs for a bit. Then we have a short remaining time, our second half, of which I hope you'll all stay tuned. It's we're going to really go over with the official launch of Train Rider Northeast next project, and we're going to kind of launch that and let you know what we're doing.